Hi there, my name is Roxane Webster.
Hey everybody, and I'm Keith Alba.
And guess what? We are the owners and partners of my home team at Keller Williams, and this is the
The
Honest Hour, right?
That's right. This is our space to kind of bring to you everything Colorado real estate adjacent in a no spin manner other than Roxanne's chair spin. It's a staple of our, our podcast there, whatever we want to call this.
Well, and
Uh,
help us please the algorithm gods by clicking like and subscribe and that little notification bell so you can know when we've got more great content coming down. Of course, share it with everyone.
right, of course, who wouldn't want to hear from us? Right? We're brilliant and bring all kinds of good information on
And overwhelmingly modest.
it. What are we talking about today?
You know, this is kind of a hangover of the aggressive sellers market that we have been in for the past several years. Normally when you sell a house, um, you negotiate the contract price, the closing date, all the terms and the conditions. A part of the process of negotiation is the buyer inspecting the property and making requests for any needed repairs on, I always focus on the five major systems plus environmental issues. So heating, cooling, plumbing, electrical, roof, foundation, and, radon, any other environmental issues that we may have associated. And then you open a new negotiation, right? Where the buyer says, well, I've found defects in these areas and we'd like you to correct them. And a seller says, well, maybe I'll correct half of them or I'll reduce the price or I'll give you a credit. It negotiates. We come to an agreement on something that the seller can feel good about and the buyer can feel good about. That's how it normally goes in the course of a contract. But tell us a little bit about how inspection negotiations have been going through an aggressive seller's market, Keith Alba.
Well, I think it's first important to point out that, the parties when they enter into the contract to buy and sell, the purchase agreement there, it's specific language that's in there that says as is, where is, with all faults. The property is being transferred as is in its current condition, where is in its spot with all faults. So that's what the parties have agreed to up front. But then there is the section in inspection that says, hey, if there's a deadline that's associated with it, the buyer would have the right to submit an inspection objection that we call it here. But going back to that as is, where is with all faults, sellers under no obligation to do any of that sort of stuff, right? They
That's
can
right.
say, no, pound sand, we've already agreed, it's where as is, right? And there's not going to be anything else that's done. So many times it is in the seller's best interest to go ahead and maybe negotiate on some of those items, address some of those items, because a couple other things come into play, right? Um, there's an automatic termination. So if buyer submits their inspection objection on or before the inspection objection deadline and resolution isn't met by the inspection resolution deadline, then the contract is over. It's done. Buyer gets their
Dies a
earnest
natural
money.
death. Boom.
Yeah. Seller's back on the market looking
Buyer
for
gets their earnest money back.
buyer gets their earnest money back. Everyone takes their balls, goes home. Seller's starting the process over, trying to find a new buyer out there. In many of the conversations I'm having with sellers, we don't know what that next buyer is going to offer in terms of the purchase price. We know that with this buyer that we have in hand, and we don't know what that buyer, the next buyer, is going to ask for in terms of those inspection items. So it could be even a longer list of laundry items that they want to get addressed in the
Not to
pieces.
mention the fact that everything that the first buyer asked for is now a known material defect that the seller has to disclose to the future buyer.
Right. Now, we're not saying that, this inspector is all knowing, but there is the concept out there that there is a body that said these are defects that are a problem with the house, right? You can hire an electrician to combat it or something along those lines, but it's always best to give both positions, right? Here's what the inspector said. Here's what my electrician said. Buyer, if you have any concerns, do your own investigations moving forward. But you're absolutely right. There is some knowledge that is now brought in by having that inspection completed. Right? There's a person that's out there that says that these are defects, and I agree it should absolutely be disclosed. And so the different markets kind of dictate what buyers can negotiate for as a part of this inspection process. It wasn't too long ago that we're seeing contracts come across where inspection was completely waived, right?
Wait,
There was no inspection objection, there was no inspection termination, and so it was like, hey, seller, I'm taking it as is. I'm agreeing to the terms of this sort of a thing. Now, fast forward a couple of years from now, I'm seeing a lot of failure to disclose litigation that's coming out because of those contracts. Buyers are saying, hey, seller, you knew about this issue. You failed to disclose it. Had I known it, would have affected my ability or desire to purchase this property. So that wasn't a great situation. While it seemed fantastic for sellers initially, we're seeing that kind of come out the back end in lawsuits, in significant ones.
but we got into a marketplace where the net effect of that is that at the normal point where major systems at least are likely to be corrected, right? A buyer who's moving into a house has some reasonable expectation that the house is habitable, right? And that's one of the reasons, even though the contract says as is right in the body of the contract, right? The buyer still has that right to inspect and say, hey, I couldn't see the sewer line. We want that repair and open a negotiation, which is either going to result in the seller agreeing to do something or the buyer has the right to walk away, right? They can't be forced to buy a house that's that is in some way either uninhabitable or heading in that direction, right? It has got some major flaws to it. But when we were in an environment where, in order to even be competitive, many buyers were feeling the need to waive those inspections, we had a whole generation of house sales or two where not many repairs were performed on those houses at all, right? And if you think about somebody living in a home for 5 to 10 years, right? 5 to 10 years is the natural lifespan of a hot water heater, right? 10 to 15 years might be a reasonable lifespan of a furnace if it hasn't been well maintained, right? Or an HVAC, the AC system. If you've had a hailstorm, right, your roof may be bad, even if it's only a 5-year-old roof or a 3-year-old roof. When was the last hailstorm? So if we have this whole couple generations of home sales that didn't even take a look at these major systems, what we're starting to see now is inspections where it isn't just a furnace that may need replaced or just a roof or a sewer line. It's sometimes all of those things because the house and those major mechanicals have been neglected through the normal pressure point that would force a replacement or a repair at the sale of a property.
Right. Yeah. So the flip side of the market that we were talking about, where buyers were waiving the inspections and doing all that kind of a stuff, it goes to the buyer's market where the buyers have leverage, right? And if you're fortunate enough as a seller in a buyer's market to attract a buyer that's interested in buying your property, you're in a position where you're really kind of wanting to do anything and everything to a certain extent that the buyer is asking for, as long as it's reasonable. And that's where you're talking about those systems get addressed, they get upgraded, or at least some serious maintenance or parts replacements, heat exchangers or things along those lines would get addressed. But because we're coming out of that crazy market that was so seller focused, we're absolutely starting to see these houses and these properties that are out there that have these severely degraded guts to them, we'll call them, the
Even if
internal
the house
pieces.
itself may look beautiful, right?
Yeah,
The
the exterior can look fine.
mechanicals
Yeah,
are
beautiful grass,
neglected.
rose bushes out front, all of this sort of stuff. The curb appeal is fantastic. But when you start digging into the actual components of it, like you were talking about, the roof, the HVAC, the sewers, any of those sort of things that weren't addressed at the past transfer has only compounded during that ownership's current piece, and now it's coming back on the market without having some of those things addressed previously, and it's only further degraded from that point and becoming even a more serious issue. Um,
So
so
really,
it's
there's a couple takeaways from this conversation that I think are really important for people to have. One takeaway is the importance of an inspection and multiple inspections, right? And inspections that are thorough with and knowing too that an inspector is not like a licensed entity like we are, right? You know,
unfortunately.
anybody with a tool belt and a clipboard can call themselves an inspector. So getting a referral of a good inspector who's got a long track record, has done this a lot, crawled around, because they're really in the red flag business, right? And knowing that likely, if you're the seller, there's likely going to be several people traipsing through your house for a week while inspections are done, right? Because a realtor like Keith or I is going to suggest a general inspection for red flags, and we're likely then going to get a roofer up there, and we're going to get somebody to scope out the sewer, and we're going to get somebody to sniff the basement for radon, right? There's going to be many layers of those inspections, and each layer of those inspection may suggest more suggestions to make sure that this is a reasonable property. So that inspection process really needs to be thorough, right? And have the guidance of a skilled agent who has got the resources to direct you towards multiple good people in these areas to do it. And the second impact I see, I will say this with love and delicacy, right? But if you take a look at how many people have, how many realtors have only ever negotiated in a strong seller's market environment of low expectations, and the sellers being able to just ignore inspection issues, or buyers not even asking for them. We have got, in many cases, a large part of our industry that is as inexperienced in this kind of negotiation process as in a lot of cases their buyers are. Am I
Yeah,
stepping on any
absolutely.
wool? Yeah,
It's it's a different market than when we came out of. We were in that previous seller's market for an extended period of time, and a lot of agents or a lot of people were attracted to our industry and got into our business during that market. And now that it's shifted a little bit, it's still not terrible. It's not completely a buyer's market, but it's not as
more
strong
balanced.
as a seller's market, and sellers are having to have strong people in their corners that understand the contract, what it says, and how to negotiate those pieces. It's vital that you've got a competent agent that's in your corner, that's representing your best interest and able to have these kind of conversations with you about, okay, well, here's what the contract says, here's what your options are, and here's the ramifications of going down either one of these roads, right? So that the seller or the buyer, in any case, has an informed position where they can make their decision on how they want to proceed and move forward.
That's right. And a skilled agent to help guide them through these conversations. What is reasonable to ask for, right? And in a lot of cases, sometimes that is a delicate process of teaching and negotiating, right?
Yeah,
Hey, this is how you might want to have this conversation with your client, right? Since you've never done it before, and how do you do that with grace and tact so that it's the most effective and your best interests are represented by the outcome you want, a habitable, well-maintained home that you get to move into and close on. Nobody benefits if somebody digs their heels in and says, I'm not doing squat, get out of the contract. Well, okay, we get out of the contract, go find another one, but that's not the outcome we want. The outcome
right.
we want is a great house for you to live in.
And you're down the cost of those inspections that you've done, right? That's
That's
not
right.
recoverable. That's part of the buyer's due diligence, and they have no right per the standard contract in order to ask the seller to recoup those expenses. And so now they're going on to the next house, and they're going to have to repeat those same costs, if not more, depending on the property and what's discovered, through the initial general inspection, like you were talking about. So, yeah,
It's a highly
having
skilled market. Get a skilled agent.
get a skilled agent. Beautifully summed up. I think that's where
Yeah.
we leave it.
Yeah.
Get a skilled agent, understand their knowledge, and make sure you're comfortable with having them in your corner so they can help guide you through this process, give you the information. And, well, like I always say, our job is to advise and consult and then follow orders, right?
That's right. So, a reminder to hit the subscribe button, the little notification button, like and share so that the algorithm gods are appeased and they send our material, our splendid, modest, fabulous, highly skilled material out to more people.
Sounds good. See you on the next one.